In this world, there are a few people who are very in tune with what one might call their inner psyche. They can sense emotions, read minds, manipulate energy, speak with spirits, and sometimes, in rare occasion, see inside people and situations. A perfect intuition. This piece tells the story of one such person as she struggles to avoid almost certain death due to her gifts. The Secret Diary of Ruby Ryanne by Samantha Markham. I'm being followed, watched. I can feel it. I can't run from them, but they haven't made any advances yet. They watch me very close. They're afraid of what I can do, what I might be capable of. The funny part about the situation they have created is that they have no idea what all is in my grasp, nor will they find out just by simple observation. They don't realize this because they are all idiots. So they sit and watch, listen for any clues or weaknesses. They're looking for her and more people like me who are cursed. They're hoping to catch her, us, and break the rest of us before we take our final stance. It wasn't always this intense. They didn't keep such close tabs on me before. Before I met her, I was slightly less paranoid. Didn't feel so trapped. And I could walk into a half-lit room and not have to find a brighter source of light to feel safe enough to enter it. But I was empty then. She was able to fill up that hole, the emptiness that seemed to consume my life. She completed me, and this is where my story begins. For years, I thought I was alone in the world. With no one to understand my fear and loneliness, I thought I was going crazy. Then one day, a woman came up to me and greeted me as if she had known me for, well, years. I know, because I felt something familiar about her too. She looked deep into my eyes and seemed to gaze straight into my heart as she spoke to me. We quickly became friends, telling each other our deepest secrets and all about what we considered our shared curse. How we were never caught and captured in those days remains a mystery for me to this day. Aroura, as she told me to call her, was beautiful and smart. She was younger than me, but so very wise for her age. She was an angel stuck in a fragile human body, trapped in the mortal coil of life. She was the one who made me realize there was a reason I was so paranoid all the time, that there was a good reason for always looking over my shoulder. And it was her I first fell in love with. She told me the truth about the ugly world we were born into. The beginning of her story started with the government's first plan of action, telling the public that those like us with abilities like Aurora and me were dangerous. They said the only way to keep us under control was to lock us up or kill us. The government said that because of the things we could do, we weren't actually humans, but criminals. No, rabid animals that needed to be domesticated. They called us a genetic mistake, and from that point on, we were labeled as rogues. We were no longer obedient or accepted, and therefore not controllable or answerable. We lacked proper control, were irresponsible and undisciplined, and only the government had the means to contain us. We became our own race, singled out by a name. If you had any abnormality, whether strong or weak, you were a rogue. The public was afraid, so of course they believed the lies that spewed from the politicians' mouths like rabies. The people wanted us dealt with, and unable to cause chaos, so the rogue hunters were formed. The ones in the early years that were first caught became the first members of that organization, trained to betray us all and bring us straight to Gemini. There were a few rules a rogue hunter had to follow in obtaining the objective. All they had to do was bring us in by any means necessary. Alive was preferred, but not necessary. We know Gemini is said to be a rehabilitation center for rogues to keep them civil, but in reality, it's closer to being a science lab or a torture center, our very own hell on earth. Beyond this point is unclear, mostly because no rogue has ever made it out of Gemini alive. You have just heard the secret diary of Ruby Ryanne and her fight to stay alive along with her newfound friend Aroura. My next piece tells that same story but from Aurora's point of view. The Secret Diary of Aroura LeNayes, an original work. I thought I might be going crazy. Sure, the hints were always there, but I was young and had never heard of a term for that before. I thought I was, well, normal. Mind you, I've always hated and defied the word normal, but in this case, it's beyond my usual history of defiance, farther than I've ever been ventured before. I was amongst those the government labeled as rogues, and this is where my story begins. Her name was Ruby. She was smart, funny, and downright gorgeous. At least I thought she was. From the day we met, her hazel eyes pulled me in and had me trapped. So full of secrets. Secrets I knew needed to be confided. Full of a certain air of sadness and loneliness, fear and resentment, and frustration and denial. On the outside, she was like anyone else. I was the only one who saw deeper and knew the girl she tried so carefully to hide. I was a seer, and she couldn't sidestep my abilities. No one could. The first night we shared everything. She told me about her family, life struggles, not struggles, and everything she seemed to be hiding. Most importantly, her gift. Ruby was an empath, and a mighty strong one too, and a spirit seer, for lack of better terms. I knew there were others like me, but I never thought I'd find anyone after what Salem put me through. We spent hours talking about this subject, and I found she has always thought she was alone. It was then that it happened. I fell. Hard. There was only one problem. I was still young enough to be considered off limits to her at the time. But none of that matters when it becomes a fight between life and death, when everything is at risk and you can no longer hide. Salem and her gang of rogue hunters were after something. Something big. Bigger than anyone could ever imagine. They wanted our help. I, of course, gave in right away, but Ruby stayed firm. No was her answer, and she paid for it. Now here we sit at the bottom of this waste pit they call the holding area. Cold, starving, and nearing insanity. They said we need to be evaluated, but evaluated for what? We were prisoners. Prisoners of the government and soon to be their property. We were in what you might call a concentration camp for the rogues, 2 steps away from the torture and despair of hell. They called it Gemini. The scariest part was no one knew what lay ahead. No one had ever made it out of there alive. Here starts the diary of me, Aroura. I hope someday someone will find this journal and read of the horrors within these dreadful walls and put an end to this madness. Until then, those like Ruby and me will continue to suffer and will always have to live in fear and on the run. Thank you.